Okay, very good evening to everyone. My name's Nick Ash. I'm Vice Chairman of the IstructE Bedfordshire and adjoining counties. And welcome to tonight's webinar joint meeting with the IstructE and the ICE Herts and Bedfordshire group. This is our first webinar for IstructE at least, so we'd welcome any feedback that you have as a result of this at the end. Events in the public domain, shall we say, have overtaken us, and we've been forced to go into the webinar mode rather than our normal evening technical meeting. But I'm delighted to get things going, and hopefully you'll enjoy tonight's presentation. Tonight's speakers are Craig Hardingham from the chair, who's currently chair of the UK BIM Alliance, and Andy Bootle, who's co-lead of the UK BIM Alliance and head of BIM at Gear Construction. So I'll pass over to Craig and hope you enjoy this evening's talk.
Okay, thanks Nick. Welcome everyone. I am Craig Hardingham. As Nick said, I'm chair of the UK BIM Alliance East region. My day job, I work as a consultant for Evolve Consultancy. What we do is we help our clients embrace technology into their business as part of their everyday work and help upskilling their staff to digital methods of working. If you're wondering what the icon is in the top right, that's to remind me and Andy which slides we are presenting. So I am Mr. Cool and Andy is Mr. Happy. So I'll just hand over to Andy now.
Yeah, good evening everyone, thanks for joining us. So yeah, Andy Bootle, I've been introduced already, engagement co-lead for the UK BIM Alliance, and Keir is my day job. Just to pick up before we continue, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end, so if you have any questions along the way, you won't be able to shout out, but please in your control panel you should see a questions panel. So if you just type any questions you have as we go along in that panel, and then we'll field those at the end of the session. Okay, so before we get on, so the title of the presentation, we're going to talk to you about the UK BIM Framework and the guidance, a bit about the standards within there and the guidance therein contained as well for practical implementation. But before we do that, we just want to talk a bit about the UK BIM Alliance, just to make you aware. But before that, actually, so firstly, just really simple definition of what BIM is, and I think I'd urge you, if you're going to take one thing away from this tonight, it's this, quite honestly. So what is BIM? At its very simplest, BIM is a process defining, creating and delivering structured data and documents, making it available to the right information, available to the right people at the right time for the life cycle of the built environment asset. So it's very much design, build and operate. So UK BIM Alliance. So I'll just introduce, for those of you who may not be aware, what is it and where has it come from. So after the 2016 government mandate, a bit later in the year, the UK government task group, BIM task group, that decommissioned, the funding had stopped, they'd delivered the standards that made up BIM Level 2, so they ceased to operate and moved on to other things, but it was quite heavily acknowledged that we hadn't got there as an industry quite yet. There was still quite a lot of work to do. So Anne Kemp, who is the chair of the UK BIM Alliance as the organisation, was approached to potentially form this organisation to champion the BIM mandate and BIM Level 2 from an industry perspective, and keep that leadership and the messaging and various work to go on the way. So that was where the Alliance was born. As the slide tells you there, it's made up from people from industry, so we like to think, it's trusted independent leadership. There's no commercial gains there or goals. We're very much about mobilising the community, so connecting and mobilising the organisations like your good selves out there already, rather than everyone working in silos. Very much about enabling practical implementation and probably most importantly in my mind is getting a common message, one approach out there, because there's so many different definitions, understandings out there. So we're trying to stitch together a consistent approach for the UK and work with industry to deliver that. So probably just a quick 10 things you should know about the Alliance, or that it's probably useful to know about the Alliance. If we go through, so I think I've already mentioned this. So it's very much industry. You know, you guys are the Alliance. Anyone can get involved. People working on behalf of or doing various activities across the sector are what the Alliance is about. We do have an executive team. We commission projects based on suggestions from industry that are managed by the exec team. It's very much an open door. So if you wanted to get involved as an individual, as an organisation, there's opportunities there. We don't draw on any government funding or Innovate UK funding or anything like that. So we have to finance activities that the Alliance supports. So we are luckily funded by patrons and strategic partners. We'll talk about that shortly. And you know, the core objective of the BIM Alliance is to promote BIM to business as usual in the UK. That's what we're here to do. So there's a regional hub near you, and Craig will talk about the communities shortly. Obviously, we're talking to you tonight from a UK BIM Alliance East perspective. So that's your local hub. Should you want to, when we're back to some form of normality and we host in-person events, that's where you'd come if you wanted to come and listen to that. Or there are also BIM4 groups, so they're specific focus groups, if you like, for different areas. So there's a number of regional and specific engagement groups. We have a team of ambassadors. Again, we'll touch on that shortly. They're people who go around and promote the work that we're doing for and on behalf of industry. And like I mentioned earlier, we're very much about connecting the dots rather than creating yet another stream of work and silo. And finally, the core of the presentation today, we're talking about the UK BIM Framework and specifically the guidance. So again, it's an open door. If you want to contribute, review, peer review, and certainly please, we do encourage you to use it if you're working on a project in the UK implementing BIM. Just very quickly want to go through our org chart just for understanding, but I really don't want to labour on it. So Craig, if you can just click through. So as we mentioned, we have an exec committee at the centre, and then probably the two core streams of the Alliance are implementation and engagement. Again, we're going to talk through these after this. Building Smart UK and Ireland chapter is also part of the Alliance umbrella, if you like. Operations is very much what it says, sort of back of house operations, activities of the Alliance, and then we do have a technology group made up of some of the sort of key software vendors in industry. All of that has a layer of governance by means of non-executive directors. We have a strategic advisory group, affectionately referred to as the SAG, which is horrible, but they're very good. Some industry leaders to help advise on direction, and all of our finances and operations are managed by third party Syria. UK BIM Alliance community. So Craig's going to talk about this shortly. This really is our way of engaging and touching industry. So there's that internal goings on, and this is our way of getting our messaging and interacting with industry. There are other things that are going on that we'll talk about as well shortly, but that's how we engage with the built environment. Okay. So just quickly mention, we're not funded by any sort of government initiatives. So our platinum patrons, so there's our current platinum patrons, and then just moving on, we then have a different grades of patrons. You see we've got quite a few there. A lot of these are also part of the technology group, because you'll see there's a lot of vendors there. That's how we finance our activities.
Right, thanks for that bit, Andy. I'm here to talk about the communities. So the communities is broken down into a number of regions. These regions we have tried to align with constructing excellence, so we can work together and join efforts and also share ideas and hopefully pair together on events. the aim of the regions is to connect with industry at a local level and promote the work that the Alliance is doing. Each region holds events throughout the year to share our industry best practice and experiences and encourage everyone within the industry to move towards digital as being business as usual for our industry. So as Andy's already sort of overviewed, there are also a number of BIM 4 groups that are rapidly filling up your screen. These are specialist groups doing great work in advancing digital methodologies within their individual fields. And those BIM 4s work closely with the regions to share content through the Alliance and also participate in events to share their experiences. We also have a number of ambassadors. There is 11 ambassadors now. Part of their day job is to go out and positively promote the work that the Alliance is doing, its strategic aims and its objectives. They are also called upon to present at events as part of their role. Affiliates, this programme aims to bring together the main professional institution and trade associations. The aim is to get them working together with each other and the UK BIM Alliance to ensure that there's consistent messaging regarding BIM adoption across the UK towards implementation. Each organisation has their own focus and specialism within the industry, and that can get quite siloed in what they're working on. From recent times, there is limited working across these silos between each organisation. So the aim of this programme is to try and encourage each organisation to work together to bring industry forwards and towards digital transformation. As Andy's already touched on, consistent messaging throughout our industry is key, and we hope to access that through getting to your membership, which we're doing tonight. The Alliance can help provide content and speakers for digitally focused events if you're looking at doing anything in the future. And as Andy's already touched on as well, if you think you can help us engage, then please do get in touch with us using the engage at ukbimalliance.org email. The technology group is open to anyone providing technology within the built environment. Its focus is to discuss and agree adoption of various interoperable and open BIM standards. It is the face and voice of technology solutions for the UK BIM Alliance, and they're able to present as one collective back to industry via this platform. Their aim is to also drive awareness and Alliance awareness through the Alliance of BIM being business as usual. Implementation deals with the various projects that the Alliance have commissioned by the exec team. The notable recent projects available are the guidance documentation, which Andy's going to speak a bit later on. There is a report for measuring BIM maturity and benefits. There is a project working on a baseline of required skills for digital competency within the industry. And then there's also an ongoing project with BIM for Housing Association. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Craig. So that's an overview of the Alliance. Now we're talking about the UK BIM Framework. So firstly, what is the framework? So this is it's a framework that contains the standards, guidance, and resources for BIM implementation in the UK. Framework is replacing what we knew as BIM Level 2. So it's morphed or transitioned from BIM Level 2 to a framework, and effectively, like I said, is the overarching approach to implementing BIM in the UK. The framework, just before I touch on this, why has that come about? It's fine, Craig, stay on that slide, that's absolutely fine. So there's kind of probably 3 core reasons why that happened. And the first one being that the BIM levels, and some of you will be aware of the BIM wedge as it's affectionately known, so BIM level 1 and 2, and then the future state of what BIM level 3 was intended. Really useful, served a very good purpose, and allowed us to sort of latch on to different stages of maturity on this journey. But it got to a point where it was probably becoming more controversial and challenging than beneficial. There was lots of debate about actually accurately defining what was BIM level 1, because there's a number of standards. BIM level 2, what do you need to do out of that suite of standards to call something BIM level 2? Different people had different opinions. There was no accurate legal definition ever, and obviously from when PAS Part 2 came out in 2013, there were then emerging standards since then, all encapsulating this BIM. So it wasn't a static thing that could be defined. So that reason number 1. Reason number 2 was that actually it was the whole procurement of BIM level 2 was being slightly probably abused by clients. So there was lazy procurement. I think those of you on the call will probably have a wry smile when I say, as supply chain, often you'd receive a sentence in a contract or in a bid saying, "Yep, we want BIM level 2, please, supply chain." It was a lazy way of, and completely defeating the object of what BIM level 2 was trying to achieve, was accurately describe your information requirements to that supply chain so they can deliver them and you can check against them. So that was being a bit counterproductive. And then reason number 3 was, and we're going to talk about that shortly, was ISO 19650, the international standard now that is slowly coming in and replacing the 1192 UK series of standards. So it's very much an emerging landscape, and a framework approach was decided that was the best way forward on many fronts. So the framework, just the slide we're on at the moment, touches on 4 core areas. So design, build and operate was always part of BIM level 2. So it's always about the capital delivery phase and the operational phase. But obviously, like I've just said, it is, we're on a journey. It's a developing landscape. Technology, processes, standards are emerging, as we go through this. So it's very much building for the future as well. So under the, we've got MMC, that the build phase will link into platform design. In the operational phase, we're starting to look at, or industry starting to move to sort of smarter asset management based on real-time information, and really sort of able to intervene and respond to live data feedback from assets to improve their performance. The integrate piece is, again, allowing for the future state. Essentially, that some of you would have heard of the National Digital Twin program that Centre for Digital Built Britain are championing, researching and delivering those standards. So that will be very much that future state of the integration piece. Moving on. So really the future direction of BIM is laying the foundations and realizing digital transformation. So it's very much about approaching things and having control from analog, as we shift from analog to digital. So manual processes are starting to be, where applicable, semi-automated and then potentially automated. And obviously, like I've mentioned, that there's shareable open standards that are being developed and improving as we go through this. So just touching on, again, it's the buzzword of the year, really, isn't it? Digital twin. We hear it everywhere at the moment, and this is very much current, well, future state, really. I mentioned the CDBB program, but I think this graphic quite nicely, simply explains it, in that the future state is an ecosystem of these digital twins. So data is fed back from the asset to the digital model, and I use the word model collectively, the digital twin, so interventions can happen to really respond to that live information. And then imagine those various different types of assets actually connected, so infrastructure can start responding to the need of the citizen. But we're not here to talk about that. That was just a taster. Just move on to the next one, Craig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So as Andy's already mentioned, that BIM Level 2 is no more. So that gets scrunched up. The reason for that is that the original two BIM standards, BS 1192 2007 and PAS 1192 Part 2, have now been withdrawn due to them being replaced with new international standards, which I'm going to come on to shortly. The remaining standards in the 1192 suite are still active, but they are currently in the process of being upgraded to international standards. So BSEN ISO 9650 1 and 2 were released in January last year. That's the UK version, where it was released in January. The international standard was released late in 2018, but the UK specific version was released in January last year. As I've already said, that's there to replace BS 1192 2007 and PAS 1192 Part 2. ISO 19650 Part 3 to cover operations. That is coming out to replace PAS 1192 Part 3 and is anticipated to be released towards the end of this year. And then ISO 19650 Part 5 to replace PAS 1192 Part 5, which covers security-minded digital working, is anticipated to be released at some time during the summer. ISO 19650 Part 4, which covers asset information handover, that I believe is currently being drafted. So the new ISO 19650 standards are not a straight replacement for the previous one. So don't think that Part 1 replaces the previous BS 1192 2007 and Part 2 replaces PAS 1192 Part 2. There are elements of each of those standards incorporated into the new international ones. So that's partly because you've got this information management structure theme across all of the documents, knitting everything together for consistent information management. The core concepts of principles of BS 1192 2007 and PAS 1192 Part 2 and 3 have been incorporated into ISO 19650 Part 1. The main clauses from BS 1192 2007 and PAS 1192 Part 2 have been incorporated into ISO 19650 Part 2. And then the remaining clauses, which were specific to the way of working in the UK, have been incorporated into ISO 19650 Part 2 as part of the National Annex. So some core principles and considerations for ISO 19650 1 and 2. As Andy's already touched on, the wedge is no more from the previous BIM standards. That has now been replaced with a new diagram. This highlights stages of BIM maturity rather than levels, and again, similarly to the documents aren't a like-for-like replacement, neither are the stages. The new stages are a combination of development of standards, advances in technology, and more sophisticated forms of information management to deliver increasing business benefit. So it's not just a straight like-for-like swap. The information delivery cycle diagram has also been updated in the standards to stress the focus of the various facets of information management, information production and delivery through the life cycle of that asset. And I think Andy's now going to talk through.
I'll just take you through that, and I just want to say actually thanks for staying. We appreciate this is a really dry topic to talk for 45 minutes at you two, so thank you for staying with us. We'll try and make it a little bit engaging. So Craig, if you want to start. So yeah, that same. So we start over to the right. So assessment and need of performance. So very much the strategic planning at the start, and whether this is looking to commission a new asset or actually do some work on an existing asset. So the brief starts there. First thing that a client should do is then effectively procure and implement a common data environment process, and it says process there. So we'll come on to the CDE shortly, but have somewhere where you can go out to tender and start to receive responses. First thing then clients should be doing is defining their information requirements and then issuing out those to potential lead appointed parties, so to their core supply chain. Then those lead appointed parties will then confirm and respond with their capability to delivering that information. The appointment is then confirmed, and then that lead appointed party will need to mobilize the resources to start delivering the project. So then we come to the CapEx space, so capital delivery phase. So that effectively wedge, I suppose, for want of a better word, just indicates the various project stages and as information grows across them. Now, I just want to labour on the term project information model there. So again, the term model there is used collectively, so that isn't, don't think 3D models. The project information model is all the information that's being shared in that common data environment for the project. So includes documentation, alphanumerical information, i.e. databases, data sheets, and geometrical information, models and drawings. It's a collective term for the information during the design and build stage, effectively. So down the bottom there, we've got, obviously, and again, this isn't anything new really. So at the end of each stage, there's various decision points for the delivery team, and then information exchanges with the client asset owner, which will then trigger how the next stage continues. Just click on Craig. So there's the collaborative information production and those delivery point exchanges and decision points as the information builds to the end of stage and to end of the project and handover, and then we move into the to the asset information model, into the operational phase. So, and obviously, the real benefit of where the BIM was purposed originally was for to really start to deliver savings across the whole operational life cycle for however many years that is, keeping information up to date. And again, there'll be some exchanges along the way as various work and changes are commissioned and maintenance and the like. And again, much like the project information model, it becomes, sorry, Craig, just an asset information model. And what that means is it's when that same information is then taken forward and then used in the operational phase, and will obviously interface with other systems. So that's the information delivery cycle. And then we thought it'd be quite useful just to do a quick terminology change check effectively between what was a term in the 1192 suite, in the UK's 1192 suite, and what that now is in ISO 19650. So on the left, we have exchange information requirements, replaces what was previously known as employer information requirements. Quite handily, they acronymize the same to EIR. We have common data environment states rather than areas or sections. So that's determining whether a file, a document is in work in progress, shared or published. They're referred to as states. We have information containers instead of files or documents or containers as the 1192 suite. So any file document that enters a common data environment is referred to as an information container. Level of information need effectively replaces, but again, some of these aren't. Then it's not just a change of terminology. That fundamentally some of the concept behind what that is has changed, and this is a good example. So in level 2 we had level of detail, and specifically PAS 2 we had level of detail LOD and a level of information, which was kind of specified on a number scale, which quite frankly for a lot of us practitioners served a purpose but became a bit subjective and not very useful. So level of information need, there is a standard that's coming out of CEN Europe, the European standards body, actually describing how to specify and express level of information need and how that's done, not just by a number scale. Information management functions. So in 9650, the approach again, and a lot of these are changed based on lessons learned and feedback from implementation of the 1192 suite. So in 1192 we had roles, information management roles, so task team manager, project information manager. Some of these terms will be familiar to you. In 9650 world, that's now replaced by a function. So essentially it's assigning out various activities under a function to responsible parties, which makes far more sense when you're trying to encourage people in their normal project roles to actually engage and own some of this stuff, rather than having a BIM manager or coordinator who everything gets chucked at them. That's again not the point of what we're trying to do here. Project information requirements. So they kind of replace, but again, it's not a one-to-one for what we used to know as plain language questions. It's a slightly wider scope of what the project information requirements are, essentially setting the criteria for what each stage needs to fulfill before moving on to the next project stage. We have federation strategy replaces what was known as volume strategy. And again, these last two are probably the key ones for you, and I'll talk about this following on from this slide. So what we used to know as the employer in the 1192 is now an appointing party, and a lead appointed party and an appointed party is the terms used instead of a supplier. So I'm going to move on to those now to explain those in more detail. So I'm referencing, although I'm talking about not ISO 9650 here, I am using some of the diagrams and descriptions from the guidance, again, which we'll come on to shortly. So party and team relationships. So that diagram quite nicely demonstrates those parties that I've just talked about. So right in the center, we have the appointing party, effectively the client. That client appointing party will appoint lead appointed parties to deliver a portion of work. Those lead appointed parties will have their own supply chain effectively, which are effectively appointed parties. It gets all a bit of a tongue twister, but as you can probably appreciate, on the international stage, the UK language wasn't always consistent and appropriate with other countries and nations, so there had to be some form of agreement of how to class these various things. Essentially, so that whole arrangement effectively makes up the project team. So the whole collective arrangement is the project team. Each lead appointed party with their supply chain is a delivery team, and those appointed parties make up task teams. Hopefully that's clear. If it isn't, I'm going to now move on to the next slide, which just puts it in a bit of plain language and UK context. So if you just move on, Craig, the same diagram. So there's our appointing party, or as we know, a client in the center. Moving on. And then, so let's say at the start of the project, our client decides, right, okay, I need a design team. So his lead appointed parties, his direct appointments are with an architect, for example, and an engineer. That architect and engineer decide that they may have capability in-house. So it may be an internal appointment to other multidiscipline consultants within, or it may be that they need to, under their appointment, go and procure some other specialist services. So for example, landscape architecture or interior design. And then on the engineering side, the MEP engineer may decide that he needs to then appoint an acoustic consultant, for example. I should have actually changed that to structural, shouldn't I, for this audience, but never mind. I'm sure you get the point. And then again, whether it's a design and build or traditional, it doesn't matter. At some point, a contractor will be appointed directly by the client. So again, another lead appointed party, and then that contractor will have a supply chain that they'll start appointing. So just click on Craig one. There we go. So, that's just an example of some of the supply chain appointments from the main contractor. So that hopefully clarifies how the concept of that arrangement and the different parties and team relationships. Okay, that's fine. Move on. So we talked about information management functions. So essentially, ISO 9650 Part 2, which is the process of project delivery effectively. So each one of those clauses in that standard, if they are engaged and procured by the client, if they're again, these standards are supposed to be implemented proportionally and sensibly. So you may not, depending on the size and scale of project, all of the clauses in that standard may actually not be relevant. But the point being that each one of them does need someone to take responsibility for and do some work on it in terms of information management. So whether you're an appointing party client, a lead appointed party, or a appointed party, everyone has some responsibility to that information management function, and those clauses and activities will be assigned out appropriately. Moving on, Craig, thank you. And then touching on the common data environment. So again, many of you will be aware of these. So, but I think the nice thing that it brings home in 9650 world, and certainly the guidance, is there's often a misconception when people talk about a CDE, they automatically think of a technology, a solution. But fundamentally, the CDE is more than anything, it's a workflow and a process. But it is also a solution, a technology that may make up that process. There's never one solution that fulfills a CD, or if there is, it's very, very uncommon. There's multiple different platforms from different people and organizations involved on the project that would put in the solutions to fulfill the overall CD workflow and process. A couple of the important things to just consider with the CD, and I think I mentioned it earlier. So once a file enters the CD, it's referred to as an information container, and it will get its appropriate ID. And then the national annex to 9650 Part 2, which, while I talk about that, is just out for public consultation. Actually, there's just been an update, and that's out for public review now. You should be able to find links on social media, or if not, do drop us a note and we can point you to that. So that effectively the naming convention, any CD should enable each information container to have a unique ID, and that's really important. So things can be searched, retrieved, and then transferred between systems. Okay, move on, Craig. So another resource, document, whatever you'd like to refer to it as, but a core component for information requirements in ISO 9650 is the project's information standard. So probably previously this would be part of the EIR or something similar, but it separates it out as a focus here to really agree. So that again starts with the appointing party, the client. Fundamentally, what's the standardized elements for information exchange? So again, talking about the national annex and the file naming convention, information container naming convention. The client should start, these are the codes that I think I need to use, and this is the naming convention, which would then get enhanced as various lead appointed parties and appointed parties are procured. It will cover things like classification and structuring of information, work breakdown structures, the method of specifying the level of information need, touched on that earlier. So what we used to know as level of detail and level of information, actually how is that specified, and what needs to be followed to do that effectively. And then any considerations for the use of this information once it transfers to the operational phase. And a little example of that, for example, is Uniclass 2015 being the UK classification system, but then there may be an operational system that uses NRM3 or other. There's numerous classification systems, and there might be some considerations there. So very, very much what it says on the tin, the project's information standard.
Right, so one of the other key changes in the 19650 suite of documents is the responsibility matrix. This is for information model delivery. This is similar to what was previously called in the 1192 series. It was called the model production and delivery table. Now, most of those that were produced on projects were not very useful. As I just said, who was delivering what component at what stage? For example, if my click works, there you go, hopefully it's appeared. We want the structural engineer to deliver LOD3 for all the structural elements at stage 3. Or we want all the architect to deliver all the doors and windows to LOD3 at stage 3. Well, great. What does that actually mean in terms of information delivery? A responsibility matrix should identify what information is required against each component and who is responsible for providing that information. So in this example, you can see on the screen, it's broken down, as you can see, a lot more considerably rather than just we want the frame at this stage. It's broken down into individual pieces of information against those components. So it's now specifying that the architect is responsible for delivering all of the windows throughout the project. You can see that running across the top of the screen next to the first row in 149. But specifically then breaking down the parameters within that model to basically say that, right, at stage 3, we need the mark value completed within your model from the architect. And why is that important? Because that will then be the component name asset handover. So that will be the Kobe component.name. Similarly, identifies that the model number needs to be completed during stage 4. In this example, it's showing the role code as K as a client, and that's because this example of an image was where it's the client is a contractor, so that is a contractor's responsibility to complete that information for the asset during that stage. And so that could be a K or a W. One of the key changes is a thing called the mobilization plan has been introduced in the 19650 series of documents. It requires the delivery team to ensure any training requirements are completed to upskill the members of their team necessary to meet the requirements of the project. It also requires the delivery team to run a number of checks and tests on the process and resources in place to ensure that they work, and any changes needed to those are identified and documented prior to commencing work on the project. So it's very much during the mobilization stage to ensure that all the technologies, all the processes, all the skill sets are up to scratch, ready to roll with the project, rather than having to try and work them out during the project stages while you're actually trying to deliver it. And this is what one might look like. I think they're few and far between at the moment because there haven't been that many 19650 projects commissioned that I've seen these in. It's broken down into a number of single line items for each test. And you can see that you can then identify the responsibility for undertaking each test and assigning those to various parties and a duration against that test of work to then wrap into the overall project program to ensure the project is running as smoothly as possible.
Okay, so in terms of what you'd expect to see in an appointment under 19650, so going back to our lead appointed parties, so someone being directly appointed by the client or appointing party. So obviously you've got your main body of main appointment. There's something there called next to it, the Project Information Protocol. So affectionately previously known as the BIM Protocol. There's been a new one drafted literally as we speak, and it's very soon to be released, aligned to 19650, which deals with the legal side of the contract for working using sort of BIM standards. So dealing with IP and ownership and all of those sort of things. So that's soon to come out. So you'd have your main appointment from the client effectively as a lead appointed party with the information protocol. Then you'd have a number of schedules included in that appointment, such as the exchange information requirements that we talked about earlier. And that will cover things like level of information needs, supporting information acceptance criteria, delivery milestones, etc. Talked about the project information standard. So what standards of the project is the project following? Obviously, prior to appointment, there would have already been a BIM execution plan response from the lead appointed party and their supply chain leading into that, or potential supply chain leading into that. So that would then be confirmed in that appointment, as well as the delivery team's master information delivery plan. So that's the kind of how the appointment should be set out. And again, some of these that doesn't mean they have to be separate resources. They may be contained within one or two or three documents. But the point is those activities, those clauses, those specifications should be covered one way or another. Now, interestingly, if we just move to the next slide, there's a very, very subtle difference between what a lead appointed party and an appointed party, so supply chain of lead appointed party, would expect to see in an appointment. And if you just do one more click, Craig, I'll just highlight those. So obviously the difference is the lead appointed party, so they get that exchange information requirement from the client, the appointing party. They then put their exchange information requirements down to each of their supply chain partners. So that may contain quite obviously what the client wants, but also anything additional. So it's almost like a filtered and enhanced version of what the lead appointed party may want from that particular appointment. So subtle difference there. And then over on the right, we've got, and so obviously for each appointed party, you'd be producing a task information delivery plan telling that lead appointed party what you're delivering and when. So that would then be confirmed back in your appointment, and off you go. So that sets out the appointment side. And then really this was just to round off what we're talking through. When you look in detail, it starts to get quite complex, but actually if you boil it back down to a simple workflow, effectively you've got that first box, the appointing party, the client, sets out their information requirements to what they want. The lead appointed party then plans how to deliver those with their supply chain. Those appointed parties, or task teams as we're affectionately calling them, produce the information, deliver the information. The lead appointed party then approves it at the various milestone stages, project stages, and then back to the client appointing party then authorizes it if they accept it, and it's done. If there's anything that isn't accepted, then that would obviously be fed back, and then it comes back through the process. So actually when you take a step back out the detail, it's quite logical and straightforward. Okay, so we've talked about some of the key things to know and think about with ISO 19650. I'm now going to focus on the guidance that's been produced in the UK to help implement. So just a bit of background. And this is just to show you the range of different organisations across the industry that are involved with this, and there's probably a few more to add to that now, to be honest. But there's a real nice blend. So there's quite a balanced. We're not leaving any stone unturned. There's contractors involved with this. There's consultants. There's information management specialists. There's legal people. There's you name it. We've got someone from whatever clients, HS2 there as well. We've got individuals from every organisation you can imagine. So in terms of the guidance that's currently available, so we've got two at the moment. They're PDF documents, but just to note, we are hopefully with CDBB moving towards an online solution. At the moment, they're PDF documents. So part one, which was based on ISO 650 part one, so it's a tongue twister. The concepts was published early part of 2019 and has remained static because it's talking about the concepts. The key document I'd like to signpost you to is the part two, edition 3, which we're now on. So we're currently on the 3rd edition. At the end of the month, any day now, actually, the 4th edition is going to be released, which is the guidance against actually the processes for project delivery. So 9650 part 2, and there's some really good content in there. Really is. So I'm just going to alert you to some of that. So in there, and I've talked a little bit about it. So there's in terms of the different parties, it highlights your key activities, clauses that you really need to be aware of, and kind of the level of input you need to focus on the various clauses. Let's move on, Craig. There's a really good bit of guidance which was authored by John Ford, Galliford Try, about the common data environment. We talked very briefly about that. That really gives you a nice step-by-step and again plain language description of what a common data environment is and actually how information should move through it. There's a table down there just showing, it often causes a bit of confusion how the various status codes work with and how revisions work as information moves from WIP to shared to published. So there's some real nice practical guidance of how the intention behind the standards and how that can work in practice. Definitely point you to that. At the back of the document are single page insights, I'm calling them there, but really useful, again, expanding on each clause in 9650 part 2 and actually giving a bit more detail about what that means, who contributes to it, other considerations in the standard that and related clauses. So it just gives you that extra bit of quick definition if you're struggling with understanding what one of the clauses is. And then I've left these couple of slides in because I'm assuming most people on the webinar would probably fulfill appointed party. We may have some that would fill a lead appointed parties as structural engineers and supply chain, but probably more often than not appointed party, I'd guess, hazard a guess. So just to really highlight again from the guidance, there's some really nice clear guidance on the things that you need to be aware of and focus on. So your key activities as a prospective appointed party would be to confirm your capability and capacity to manage the information required, produce it, and have knowledge of the relevant standards, and obviously your availability of IT and resources to help deliver it. And actually, if you look at the table to the right, table 8, as an appointed party, the only thing you're actually responsible for preparing in terms of the documentation or resources is your task information delivery plan. The lead appointed party would probably ask you to, and should ask you to, lean into the BIM execution plan and provide input, and obviously the exchange information requirements that you get from them, but you're fundamentally only responsible for that task information delivery plan as an appointed party. If we move on, Craig. And then there's quite a nice sort of clause focus, which gives you almost like a heat map of the various clauses where you need to really focus your attention as an appointed party. So in terms of 5.1 and 5.2, obviously you're not involved with that. You need to have some input to the tender response of the lead appointed party as a potential appointed party, into the appointment and mobilization, and then a high focus on obviously you're producing information collaboratively and helping deliver that information model. And then there's a breakdown there of the clauses. So 5.3.3, assess task team capability and capacity, and I won't read them all out, you can read them there, but it steers you through those clauses where you'd have a focus. And then the ones related there again down to the right are just other clauses and activities, resources to be aware of when you're carrying out those activities. Okay, so the next updates to the guidance framework, I think I mentioned we're literally about to publish. Just move on, Craig, sorry. There we go, there gives us a little bit of a timeline. So we're currently on edition 3, which was released in Q1 this year in January. And then the main additions to edition 3 was guidance on the BIM execution plan, more of a higher level guidance, I suppose. There's further more detailed guidance coming, and then information requirements generally, really good piece by Emma Hooper in there. The Q2 April release, edition 4, that's about to come out any day now, is real proper practical guidance on what should be in exchange information requirements. There's a piece on open data, piece on information delivery planning, so you mentioned MIDPs and TIDPs, and some starting guidance to level of information need. The challenge there, actually, quite honestly, is that I mentioned earlier there's a standard being produced at the moment by CEN, the European Standard Commission, for level of information need, but we don't expect that to be published for some time yet. But level of information need as a concept is mentioned in ISO 9650, so we felt it was important to put out some guidance in the meantime of how you could approach that practically. So that will be in there. Q3, which is to be TBC, but at some point in Q3 this year, guidance on the information management function. I should know because I'm co-authoring that. And also there's going to be, like I said, some more detail added to the BIM execution plan guidance. So this is really, I like to say, good stuff by practitioners, people who have tried to implement these standards in practice and now are giving practical guidance to how you could approach these things to try and get some better consistency across industry, so we get more efficient. And that, again, it's evolving. The framework's evolving. It's live. Please use it. What it says on the tin. So how do you access it? Well, there's a website. So the address is there, ukbimframework.org. Go and have a look at it, have a click around. There's links to the standards. Obviously, the ISO standards are paid for standards, so you can't just go and download them straight from there, but it will signpost you to BSI where you can procure the standards. The guidance, importantly, is free to anyone, so that is downloadable here and now. Please do go and download that and reference it, and there's some explanation and resources on there as well. Again, it's evolving. The guidance will start to become an online resource soon. We're feeding back. We're absolutely about getting feedback from industry, so there's numerous working groups ongoing to try and collect feedback from industry to help form some of these standards and specifically the guidance going forward. So it's an open shop, and we do encourage you to get involved and feedback where you can. And that wraps us up quite nicely at 6:59. So thank you very much, and we'll move to some questions.
Hi, okay, so I have the questions and I'll go through them in the order I've had them come in. So first question is, how does this impact the government mandate from 2016 and therefore public sector clients? How do they achieve BIM level 2 in quote marks?
Brilliant. Okay, I think I can take that one, if that's okay.
Yep.
So the first part of the question, so you may or may not be aware, and it's literally hot off this, a very good question actually, hot off the press and out there now, as of this week, I think, Pam, wasn't it? CDBB, Centre for Digital Built Britain, with the Alliance leaning into it, and the Construction Innovation Hub have published a report, and I'll just try and get this right, the BIM Interoperability Exchange Group, am I right, Pam?
No,
Expert group, sorry, report, which is very much looking at the current challenges with interoperability, information exchange, and in there is very much the need. The report looks at the need for a rejuvenated BIM mandate in the UK, exactly like you've asked, aligning to 9650 in the current landscape within, because things have greatly moved on since the previous mandate. So I'd encourage you to go and read that, and again, it's out there for feedback as well, so that you can comment via the CDBB website. and it does touch on exactly that rejuvenated government mandate, which BEIS, the department, are behind. So we think that's just a matter of time to happen, we hope, with a new task force assembled to help guide interoperability, open standards, and really put a focus on that amongst many other things. So it's well worth a read on that.
Okay, thanks, Andy.
Just remind me that there was a second part to that question, which I've since forgotten.
How do public sector clients achieve BIM Level 2?
So as we said, BIM Level 2, there's obviously projects at the moment that are running and were procured under the BIM Level 2 banner and standards, and absolutely those continue. You wouldn't want to change mid-project; that would be counterproductive. But as we said, going ahead, BIM Level 2 is now effectively gone and superseded. There is a public sector working group that is in existence with some of the key individuals from the various government departments and some other expert advisors forming public sector standardized requirements, or where they can gain some consistency aligned to the ISO. There's work going on there, so that is happening behind the scenes.
There is also the BIM for Clients group, and if you are a client, you can get involved in that particular group as well.
Yes.
I have quite a few questions, so short, quick responses, please. What is the standard? No, sorry. When is the standard for identifying level of information need being released? Do we know that?
We don't know that. No, we don't know that. I think again, it has to go through a process. I think I'm just trying. I don't want to steer you wrong. I've got a good feeling it's not likely to be. It's either the end of this year or the start of next year. Is from what I recall being discussed, but there's no finite dates yet.
Okay.
But there will be guidance, like I said, coming out very soon that advises how to deal with that in the meantime.
Is the responsibility matrix contractual?
Craig, I'll let you do that one.
Yes, because sorry, short answer. I know Pam asked for it. Yes, because now in new terms, the BIM execution plan forms part of the contract, and the responsibility matrix is part of the BIM execution plan. So yes, it absolutely is contractual.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. As Andy pointed out, many clients often ask for no more than BIM Level 2, usually because they don't understand the details of what they're asking for. Assuming that they haven't heard of or don't understand ISO 19650 and still require BIM Level 2, can we still provide BIM Level 2 service even though the standards are being withdrawn?
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, whoever, please, someone answer it.
Sorry, just repeat it again for me, Pam.
Andy.
Sorry.
So as Andy pointed out, many clients often ask for no more than BIM Level 2, usually because they don't understand the details of what they're asking for.
Yes.
Assuming that they haven't heard of or don't understand ISO 19650 and still require BIM Level 2, can we still provide them BIM Level 2 service even with the standards withdrawn?
Absolutely. So I would encourage, and appreciate it's a difficult conversation, I'd encourage clients to start looking at 9650 but at the end of the day, client is king, and if they want to at the end of the day, whatever forms their information requirements, even if it's a superseded standard, that's what supply chain, if client's going to pay for that service and that delivery, then that's what the supply chain needs to deliver. The concepts are very much the same between 1192 and 9650, so you can still provide that service. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I can just
signpost clients to 9650.
Agree with what Andy's just said. The only addition I'd have to that is if your client requirements are woolly, I would always encourage you to submit as part of your tender return, accompanying your fee, an outline BIM execution plan detailing out exactly what you will be delivering for them. So you basically tell them what you're delivering for your fee.
Yeah, good advice.
Thank you. Referring to the party and team relationships slide, how does this arrangement work with a novated, I want to say, is that word,
Yeah.
client team?
Yeah. Yes. So exactly how. Craig, can you pop back to that slide? Actually, just
I can if you want.
And while we're talking, so no different. The arrangement is exactly the same. So you know, obviously, I had where the contractor comes on board and procures their supply chain. So that novated. Oh, let's get back to the slide.
Sorry, everyone.
No, that's fine. Loads of animations, isn't there? So let's say so when the design team are appointed, there we go. So our lead appointed party architect, lead appointed party architect and engineer. At the moment, they're so early stages in a D&B, for example, they're they're working for the client, the appointing party directly, and then no different when the client then forms the main contractor's appointment and they come on board, then those appointed parties and any delivery teams become novated across under the lead appointed party contractor. So yeah, rather than working directly for client, that consultant or engineer would be working for contractor. So that potentially those 3 delivery teams would morph into 1 delivery team. And again, there may be only, depending on how things are appointed, the architects. Let's say there's an engineer, a structural M&E, and an architect appointed originally as a design team. Is not to say that all of the clauses relating to the lead appointed party would have to be done by everyone. There's a bit, it's not that rigid. So, typically the architect does take the lead for the design team, in which case they'd probably be doing the majority of those clauses and responses in coordination with their co-lead appointed party engineers, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. 3 more questions. What do you see as the biggest change under the UK BIM framework from the previous standards?
I mean, Craig, have a go. The biggest thing I've taken from 9650 personally is the focus on the client, the appointing party, to actually have to do their bit, which I think was, as a practitioner for years under trying to implement BIM Level 2, the amount of times, you get clients who get it and procure things correctly, but the amount of times, and we still see it today, we get tenders coming over the fence and there's a CD-ROM with files buried in folders, no naming convention, but we're expected as a supply chain to conform to 1192 and all of those things. So there's absolutely a lesson learned and a focus back on the client to, if you want to work in this way and deliver the project this way, there are core activities that you have to fulfill to enable your supply chain to deliver.
Okay, I can probably answer this one. Do you have a BIM for nuclear industry group, and how do I get in touch with them? Yes, we do have a group that's focused on nuclear. Drop us an email at communities@ukbimalliance.org and we can provide you with the details on that one. Final question, is there guidance aimed at educating clients on how to specify their information requirements to be useful to them rather than just wanting BIM?
Yes. So in the guidance that's literally about to drop at the end of this month, there is practical guidance on exchange information requirements. So, and there'll be an element of the why in there as well as the how and that. So yeah, do have a look at that once it's released, because
that will be published on April 30th because I'm the one who's publishing it. So yeah, end of the month it'll be done and ready. And that's it. That's all the questions that have been asked. I don't know if Nick wants to sum up or whether that's you guys.
Yep. No, thanks Pam, and thank you both Andy and Craig for going through and bringing us all up to date with ISO 19650 and how the UK BIM framework will replace the wedge, if you like. Some of those wedges were used to prop open doors, I think, in some offices. But anyway, but thank you very much, guys. That's really helpful, and I'm sure those on the call and who have remained on the call, as something like 60 of you
Wow.
so far have actually managed to remain on. So thank you very much. Hopefully you found it entertaining and enlightening, and we'll look forward to seeing you when we're back to face. Hopefully just a small point for our next meeting. We're not sure when that will be yet, but please keep an eye on your emails. It may be also another one of these webinars, and hopefully by the 14th of July is our regional dinner for the Institution of Structural Engineers, Bedfordshire and adjoining counties, when hopefully our president will be with us. But again, keep an eye on your emails to find out whether that's going ahead or whether it's being delayed. Thanks very much. I know we can't sort of open the mics and wish a round of applause to Andy and Craig, but thank you very much indeed.
Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good evening and keep safe.
Yeah, stay safe. Thank you.